welcome to the Sick Ass Show, Nick. How's it going?
Good, thanks, Rik. How are you, mate?
Yeah, good, pretty good. Thank you so much for being a guest in the show, Nick. Really appreciate it. And you come from deep south. That's where your nickname comes in, right, Nick?
Yeah, I am the Deep South Yeti. Old, grey, fighting off polar bears and penguins every day. But that's how we roll down here.
Love it. For our viewers and our listeners out here, do you want to introduce yourself, Nick? And then I'll probably have more questions, but I'll introduce the topic that we are wanting to discuss today. But before that, tell us about yourself, mate. Who you are, what you do, and yeah, just take it away.
Yeah, so as Rik said, my name's Nick Baty. I'm a principal cybersecurity consultant for the Bastion Security Group. The Bastion, for some of those of you who may know, is the bulk of the workforce based in Wellington. And then we've also got an office in Auckland. Bastion as a organisation still relatively new. It actually came into being the 1st of January this year. Prior to that, Bastion was actually the amalgamation of 4 different security companies. And within that context, I was part of ZX Security, which is one of the 4 companies. And actually, I've been with ZX and Bastion combined for almost 3 years. And I've actually worked for the entire time for both organisations remotely here from Dunedin. And that's where I live with my lovely family. I actually live out in Macandrew Bay in the Otago Peninsula, overlooking the bush across the harbour, so it's a really rough state of affairs. No, not at all. It's pretty nice living here. And then I joined my colleagues in Wellington when as and when I need to, and also working to go and meet my clients as well. So I look after a few clients here in Dunedin, but the majority of my clients are based around the country, and I'm predominantly a GRC specialist. And a lot of the work I do is what we call virtual CISO. So a lot of it's ongoing advisory support and guidance, undertaking effectively activities on behalf of organisations, supporting CIOs, CTOs, boards, executive leadership teams, really just helping them make sense of what cybersecurity means for them as an ongoing issue for the business, and what I like to call putting the squishy, warm, fuzzy side of cybersecurity in place and leaving our wizard smart pen testing and other technical guys to get on and do the real work. Meanwhile, I sort of explain what it all means from a practical sense in a business context around what it can mean for exposure, what it can mean for reputational risk, what sort of obligations they have in the privacy and security domain, but probably most importantly, how to sustainably manage the topic as an issue, as an ongoing business concern, and how you resource it and manage it effectively, which is actually a really interesting way of approaching things, because it's very much different down here in the South Island, as I do in other urban centres, as I've found out. But yeah, so it's a lovely way of doing things, but keeps me busy, so it's a real pleasure.
And you mentioned that it's a bit different down in the South Island. Draw us a picture, mate. Tell us, because I'm pretty sure a lot of us, have experience working predominantly in Wellington and Auckland. But tell us about, how it works, the vibe, and how generally people think about cybersecurity.
Yeah, so I've been at this racket for about 10 years or so. So the vast majority of my career prior to moving down here, I've been down here for almost 6 years. The vast majority of my career prior to this time, me living down here, was in the public service, mainly in the national security community. So I was very accustomed to working with government agencies and large organisations within that context. But when I moved down here, I had to go through a real reformation and a transformation of how I did business, how I engaged with organisations, how I did cybersecurity. I mean, one of the first times I actually met with a prospective client down here with a new Dunedin-based colleague of mine. I went to see them, and I was pretty brash and pretty rude, I have to say, and which is not saying that I am normally, but and the way you did security in Wellington, it was kind of quite transactional. It was like, what do you need? Let's get it done. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. What are you going to do? Right, we're off to the next one. But this particular engagement, I sort of operated that way, and I really didn't come across that well at all. And I had to learn very quickly that to work with the businesses down here and to actually work with organisations, they buy you. They don't buy a service or an outcome or engagement. They have to trust you as a person. Having a spate or a cup of coffee is some of the best currency you'll ever spend in business down here. Most of my clients, my kids go to school with their kids. So it's really about building lasting, enduring relationships. So when I'm working with new clients, it can take quite some time to sort of build that level of trust, particularly because I'm not from here. I grew up in Auckland, which is basically a burnable offence in the middle of the octagon in this part of the world. But when they get past that and they see, don't give me quite so much the beady eye, you scratch the skin, it's blue and gold. It really is. I love being here. And my parents-in-law are here. My wife's a Dunedin girl. My kids have been raised here. will be here forever. But once they understand all that, then they're a lot more happy to sort of work with you, because most of the people down here have often been working in the same jobs for about 10 to 15 years. And then they haven't had a huge amount of exposure to security specialists per se, as we would do in Wellington or Auckland. Down here, there's a lot of generalists. So people who've been doing generalised IT, sort of infrastructure, networking, bit of web application development and that sort of stuff, but very few in the way of security speciality. So often any security work has been done by people who are doing it as best they can with the resources they have. And they're very proud of that, and as they should be. But really, my mission is to work alongside these organisations and support them. And as I say, look, all I'm trying to do is help you guys make the best decisions you can about the information that matters the most to you within the resources you have, and on the basis of the risk appetite you decide. And then I follow up by saying, well, I've got a toolbox of really smart people in Wellington and Auckland who we can bring to bear to help you get the job done. But ultimately, I'm here to help you. I'm here for the long run. So give me a call when you need it. So it's not really the business of chasing people actively as so much as they'll reach out to you when they're ready. And so it's learning to be patient and understand it's the long game. But when they work with you, they generally will work with you forever. They're not going to go anywhere else. And you get to build really strong relationships and more enduring relationships. And it's just a different way of doing things. And it's certainly the same to a slightly different extent in Wanaka and Queenstown and Invercargill, I've found. But I've found for some of the people I've dealt with who've come from Wellington down to here, it's getting to understand that it's softly. It's often might not be the first or second or third meeting. It might be the fourth or fifth meeting before you get someone saying, oh, yep, I wouldn't mind getting that assessment done. Or what sort of, pen testing capability do you have? Often in Wellington or Auckland, you know what you're there to talk about. You're there to scope out the meeting, scope out the engagement. In many cases, you're able to get the statement of work agreed and then signed within a day or two. I think the quickest time we've got statements of work signed down here is like a month, and it takes quite some time. And so that means that you just have to be patient and play the long game. But it is find the engagements down here to be really, really rewarding because of that. Because it is, as you say in the security community, it's trust and confidence. So it really is about actually having trust and confidence as well.
That's a brilliant summary of what's it like down there, Nick. Thank you for that. What would you say the challenges were when you moved from Auckland?
It is a difficult place to move into here, sort of cold, if you will. Because I'm working remotely, it means I'm not directly tied to here, because it would be very difficult for me to sustain a portfolio of clients if I was only working here, because there aren't many organisations in Dunedin and in the Otago region that are generally big enough to justify ongoing cybersecurity engagement. And those there are, often they'll have full-time equivalents in place. And so to be engaged externally is something that can be still quite new for them. I'd be wanting to make sure, if they were coming down here, they weren't from here, that Dunedin's not Wellington or Auckland. It's a bit more relaxed. We do things a little quieter, a little slower here. There is a slight regional, big country town feel in the very best of ways here. There's not the same sort of intensity and frenetic pace there is in Wellington or Auckland, which is what I really enjoy about living here, having lived in those cities before. I think you need to be really open to and really good at networking, but willing to spend the time to build relationships, get to know people, and you need to be kind of willing to turn your hand at a whole range of things, because obviously there's still a fair amount of people that use on-prem here, growing use of cloud. One other thing, if you're interested in Dunedin, has actually got a very large and rapidly growing gaming community. So a lot of people doing online gaming, building games development. So if you're interested in software development or web development and that sort of thing, web application development, this would be a great place to be working in that space. OWASP top 10 all the way, because there's increasing amounts of that kind of workforce is needed down here. And one of the things I like to do, one of the things I really like to do is talk to guys and girls at the Otago Polytech and the University of Otago about what a career in cybersecurity is like. Because unfortunately, a lot of them will leave those institutions and not go to Auckland, Wellington, or Christchurch because they don't think there's much of a future for them here, which is kind of sad, because we really need some smart cookies down here to help keeping us ticking over and get this stuff done. Because
I might have just missed you when I was graduating, because I had no idea that there was a career in cybersecurity. I was going to be a dev, and then my entry was accidental.
No, I actually don't have a tech background at all. I'm an art student, so I kind of fell into it as part of the time in my career to get here. But as they're saying, a lot of guys and girls will sort of work in this space, but they often look at security from the outside going, how do I get into that? And it does seem like quite difficult to get into cybersecurity. And often, unless you're in Wellington or Auckland, it can be quite difficult to break into. It's almost impossible to do it outside of those cities in New Zealand, actually. You kind of have to be part of an established organisation to be able to get in and actually, get the ball rolling. So for them to be able to say, hey, look, we've got stuff here, it's about how do we sort of help people out and actually get them talking and get them understanding what good looks like, and actually understanding that starting out as a generalist, service desk or other sort of generalist tasks are really, really good. They're really good ways to get into security because you need that broad range of experience and insights and knowledge, because it's understanding what good and bad look like is what actually makes you a really good consultant, because it's having that knowledge and capability to really understand what your client's telling you, what they may not be aware of that you need to guide them on, but also being able to help shape and hone your judgment. So when they ask, well, what do you think? You can comfortably provide advice and insight that actually goes, I feel comfortable that sounds like a good idea. Because ultimately they want to trust you, but it's all about having the confidence to deliver stuff, but also tell them what's going on, but also being able to say, look, I don't know the answer to that. I'll go and find out, and I'll get someone else to give you a hand as well. And that all comes with, maturity and time and that sort of thing. But certainly, it would be lovely to have some more security guys down here, because there certainly are some businesses that would benefit from that. There aren't too many full-time roles down here, but I'm lucky I get the best of both worlds. I get to sort of work with those sort of organisations down here, living a really lovely lifestyle. We'll still have the ability to, the cut and thrust of big city cybersecurity, which is great.
Dunedin would always have a special place in my heart, and I completely agree with you. Nick, you've been giving talks around Australia and New Zealand, about a lot of different things. But one of your talks, which is very important, was about neurodivergence in cybersecurity. So I thought, we could talk about that today in your first appearance in the Sick Show. And then obviously, when you're back as a returning guest,
of course,
I'm sure you'll have a lot more stories to share with us.
Yeah.
Because every time I talk to you, you've got so much to share, which is a joy. So again, very blessed, and thank you for accepting the invite.
Not at all. It was a pleasure.
Let's address the topic.
Yeah, so I mean, this topic's especially personal for me. I have adult ADHD and Asperger's, which beings on wired a little differently, which is good. It's as I like to say, it's good to know how your superpower works and how what's good and bad and all that bits and pieces. So neurodivergence is essentially it's an umbrella term that characterizes and loosely describes a range of conditions, both diagnosed and undiagnosed, that generally relate to the way people process information, the way they behave socially. The most common conditions, if you will, that are come under that umbrella, things like ADHD, Asperger's syndrome. It also can cover things like dyslexia. It also relates to other forms of autism and that sort of thing. So it's like we often say, it's very much a spectrum. So for me, one of the challenges, the key challenges thing are the ability to what I call safely and consistently interpret social cues and signals around me. Which you'd say, how do you manage this as a consultant? I'm going, well, it's been a very much a learned journey for me. But one of the things that, so I've had a lot of support and help over the years to get to where I am today. But one of the things that I was really, really keen to talk about is because I like to challenge things. I mean, traditionally, in my experience, when people go to cybersecurity conferences, it often can be quite technical, can be quite heavy, and it's often the pen testers or the app set guys or the infrastructure guys doing the talks. But I'm determined to be a bit different, which is why I'm the Deep South Yeti, is that actually it's about GRC. We've got some things to say too. We can bring some stuff to sort out. It doesn't necessarily have to be just about CNA and auditing and stuff like that, which is often where GRC often will go to, which, if not done really well, can be a little dry. But I actually wanted to call out some of the taboos in the room and go, actual fact, one of the most biggest unspoken characteristics and trends in our industry, in New Zealand especially, is that we have a lot of neurodivergent people in our industry. And also, in the time that I've been doing cybersecurity, there has also been a lot of either diagnosed or undiagnosed neurodivergent grads or students or career changers who want to also get into the industry. But the consistent feedback I often have is from those in the industry is, I don't know how to explain how I tick. I feel embarrassed by it. How do I ask for support from my manager? How do I don't want so people don't take things the wrong way, or those who want to get in the industry is like, the prospect of a job interview or networking terrifies them because it's just something that is not natural to them. And they'd be quite happy just with headphones on in a dark room, busily coding away and smashing out Python. That's what they'd love to be doing. But the reality is in order to get a job or work in the community or work in a team, these are social skills we need to learn to, at least you won't necessarily have to master. We at least have to be comfortable coming to terms with them, or have this sufficient skills to be able to appropriately articulate the request for support that they may need. So at the ITF conference, the New Zealand ITF conference in October, I shared my journey, with a room full of people. As I said, way to nakedly bare your soul at scale through industrial lens. And I spoke about some of the challenges that people have. I spoke about some of the things for people who are colleagues of neurodiverse people, those who are managers of neurodiverse people, and also some thoughts for those who are trying to get into the industry as well. So I guess, if I'm reflecting on some of the things I shared, for those who are colleagues of neurodiverse people, it's creating an emotionally safe space for these people where they don't feel that they feel like they're being sort of suppressed, or the real them is being overly scrutinized or watched or judged. It's not ignoring them, but it's, dare I saying, it's having sufficient emotional maturity just to be a bit more flexible, a bit more tolerant of the ways in which they do things. One of the characteristics of people with ADHD and with Asperger's is often that hyper focus on a particular task or issue. Like, when I want to roll, I can sit from 9 in the morning through to 5 in the afternoon and barely take a toilet break or eat because I'm just focused on getting this stuff done. And I'll smash out 8 hours without even batting an eyelid. And my wife's like, how do you do that? And I said, it's just because I'm in the zone, and I can just get that done. So that's awesome. You don't always feel like great afterwards, feel absolutely knackered, but it's just one of those things. But also understanding that sometimes people in those, sometimes if you're really, really busy and someone disturbs you, it can be really frustrating. And sometimes you can be quite blunt or even a bit grumpy about the fact of being disturbed. And other people who don't necessarily see the world that way might be like, hang on, that was a bit of an extreme reaction. And you don't mean it that way. It's just that it's really hard to get into that sort of focus zone. And then when people disturb it, very innocently most of the time, it can be quite disruptive. And you kind of transition from that focus state back to a social state. It's can sometimes be a bit of an abrupt shock and a bit of an abrupt journey. And also, I guess the other thing is that for those who are managing neurodiverse people, it's actually about having them understand how to sort of give those people space, how to work out, and this can be hard, how to identify sort of cues when people may need help but don't necessarily know how to articulate that or need support. But one of the things I've always said is if you're going to be managing neurodiverse people, you need to be giving those people to managers who have real emotional maturity, who don't necessarily get ruffled that easily, can be sort of roll with the punches and be quite flexible. Because the thing is, you're dealing with someone who can be potentially a little below the place. And things like admin, like other bits and pieces like that can sometimes be difficult, those small nitty-gritty sort of repetitive tasks. Sometimes people with those backgrounds aren't that great at that sort of stuff. So it's working out how they engage with their staff members who are wired this way. But those managers also have reported that those sorts of individuals are incredibly rewarding to work with because sometimes they can see patterns, say through threat hunting or incident analysis or other forms of insights that most people just cannot see because of the way they think and the way they look for patterns and behaviors and various trends that makes them uniquely qualified to do some of these sorts of things. So it's a case of once they understand how to channel those capabilities, these individuals can do massive, amazing things. It's huge. But it's kind of working out what does the whole package look like and how do you give that person the space and the emotional safety to kind of be themselves and also to be able to say, which may potentially come across as quite clumsy, but being able to articulate, I'm really struggling with this, or I don't understand, and that can be really tough for someone in that position to be able to articulate that stuff, but still being in a position to help coach and support them going, okay, that's cool. How is this going to work for you? What's going to work for you best? And that's, that sort of stuff is really, really important. And I guess if I'm thinking of those who are seeking to get into the industry, often it's those face-to-face conversations. The idea of going out for a beer or having a coffee can sometimes be a bit confronting and quite daunting because it's that sort of small talk, that social minutiae, which can be quite challenging for those individuals. It doesn't happen naturally. It's not spontaneous for them. So that's why I often said, reaching out through people into LinkedIn. You don't necessarily have to have face-to-face conversations, but you can still network and connect with people in that space. And that way you can sort of build a bit of a network there. Like if you're in a larger urban area, like in Wellington or Christchurch or Auckland, go along to the Information Security Interest Group meetings, the ISIGs, because that's kind of what I call safety in numbers. There are other people there who will more than likely be ticking like you. And so you get a chance to meet some of the local security practitioners there. And that allows you to sort of, for them to put a face to a name, for them to, you'd better talk about this is what I'm learning, and our thoughts or advice. And you can engage as little or as much as you want. These sessions aren't generally designed to have people just come along and talk. Often you'll have someone come along and present at these sessions, so you can just come along and listen if you want to. You don't have to do anything else at all. So there's lots of opportunities in that space too. What I
wanted also to deliver through this episode is in case someone is facing issues like that and want to seek out support or advice from people who have gone through similar situations, would you be comfortable if someone listening to this podcast right now reaches out to you for
absolutely
questions?
As long as they get in touch with you, you can get put in touch. Absolutely. I mean, I'm more than happy to provide people with support and advice, because God knows I've been through that journey myself, and it's really tough. It's tough.
Yeah.
But if someone feels that they felt comfortable having that conversation, I'm more than happy to have that chat. It's as confidential or as open as it's more than happy to do that. No worries whatsoever.
Thanks, Nick. Yep.
Not at all.
Cool.
Not at all.
Sorry, I'll let you go on. Sorry.
Yeah, no, that's fine. No, that's absolutely fine. And I guess that was one of the reasons why I wanted to do the podcast with you today. So to say, hey, look, there are people out there who are willing to help. It's not, and it's going to be okay. And we're not all big, scary, hairy. Well, I sometimes I am. But we're not all scary people who aren't wanting to help out. That's what we're all about, And that's the thing. It's actually about having someone who's got a bit of kindness, compassion, going, it's okay. It's fine. We'll sort it out. It's going to be okay. And so through LinkedIn, iSigs are a good way to do it. And also, if you have someone you trust nearby, tell them, look, I want to do this. I don't quite know how to do it. What sorts of things, could I be talking about? The key thing is, I think, is finding situations and finding, if you will, scenarios where you can kind of make safe connections without overloading yourself, but also knowing where to go to kind of get the ball rolling. But I do think at some of these iSigs, if there's someone who is working in the area that is of interest to you, I'm able to say, hey, look, I'm still learning. I'd like to get into this area in the future. One thing that's really, really cool about people in neurodivergence is often when they are studying, when they finally hit something, just someone else, we can procrastinate quite a bit. But often if you find something you're really interested in, they'll just smash through all those online exams like no one's business. So in some cases, you could be in a position where you're going, well, actual fact, I want to do some more study, but what do I need to study? And that's where you can ask those people saying, like, what sort of online study would you suggest or could you think of? Which is a really good thing to do. And the advantage is what's great about the cybersecurity community is there's so much knowledge and learning online that and often a lot of it's free, and you can really easily sort of take advantage of that. So building up your knowledge, getting some of those early qualifications, but finding socially safe and comfortable ways to be able to reach out to people, particularly in your local area, is really, really cool, because then you can find out, well, what organisations do they work for? What sorts of roles do they have available? Do they have service desk roles? Because you're not necessarily going to walk straight into a security role straight away, but you'll get a sense of what roles do they have that may lead to a security position in the future. And I guess the more you learn about security roles, the more you'll find which ones are the best fit for you. Often I found people who are from a neurodivergent background are really, really good at those deeply technically analytical ones, like digital forensics, threat hunting, often those malware analysis, reverse engineering type functions. Those are the ones I found people who from that background are incredibly good at, mainly because those roles don't necessarily have a huge amount of a client-facing role. Often they're deeper technical specialities. But the thing is because cybersecurity is a real team sport, there's a slot for everyone. And so you don't necessarily have to be in that client-facing space. You can do your thing and still be adding a huge amount of value to the wider team.
Cool. And again, as you've shown, it's incredibly hard, but it's not impossible to get into consulting if you're neurodivergent.
Yeah, no, exactly. I mean, a lot of the skills I have to work really, really hard at on an ongoing day-to-day basis to actually consciously practice those skills. A lot of those things that people think are, don't think, just do. It's second nature, those sort of social interactions, the ability to read social situations, identify social skills and social cues. A lot of that stuff I've had to learn, which sounds weird, but you do have to kind of learn it. And there's been a lot of failures along the way, but that's always the way it goes. But certainly I've been very lucky in my journey. I've managed to identify a lot of very smart people from technical backgrounds who have very kindly spent some time teaching me and learning stuff. And I've just, asked questions as I've gone along the way. But I've also had to learn the sort of social skills that allows me to do what I do as I go along the way. But it's certainly, it's taken me, 25 odd years to sort of get where I am and that sort of thing at least. So it doesn't happen overnight. But I think also that if you are wanting to get into the area, having people, who are willing to talk to, ask questions, that sort of thing, I wish I'd had more of that when I was a bit younger. So yeah, by all means, if someone wants to reach out and say, hey, look, this is what I'm thinking. Any thoughts or ideas, let me know. More than happy to have that conversation.
Do you think the perception around recruiters has changed from the time, say, you applied for your first job, which would be a while ago now?
Just a wee while. So my first role, my professional role after I left university was in 2002. So 23 years ago. And back then, so I was working in the national security community of central government in New Zealand. So back then, it was very much a case of what background and capabilities and skills you brought as a young graduate. Yes, there was an emphasis on kind of finding the right fit, but at that stage, you're kind of the old notion of being raw material that sort of shape you and mold you as you saw fit. And I also worked in an organisation that had quite a hierarchical feel to it, so you kind of had to do your time and earn your spurs, so to speak. So there wasn't really, not so much formally, but there wasn't really informally and socially much of a tolerance of being a bit different. And that wasn't like that. And I should add quite explicitly, no one specifically excluded me or otherwise, but it was very difficult to gel and connect with people because it was such a tight-knit, small organisation. And there was a certain type of personality type that sort of clicked into that organisation. Very charismatic, very socially experienced, if you will, effective people. And, for me, it was just, wow, this is just where I began. It was very, very difficult to initially navigate. And it was really tough. Like emotionally, it was very challenging for me the first few years. But I have to say, that's one of the reasons I like working in cybersecurity is because there's a much more open and honest acknowledgement that this is a trait that often is characterized in a lot of the people that work in this community. It's a lot more openly acknowledged. This is something that often a lot of people have to manage on an ongoing basis. I would have to say it's a lot more tolerated than other industries as well. But I've also noticed that it's interesting. When I was reading an article, I think it was on LinkedIn a couple of days ago, and they were talking about how one particular person had hired a young graduate from an ADHD background. And they said, I wasn't sure and took a bit of a chance on them. And that's the thing is, often people say, well, take a chance on someone with ADHD. And I get that, but there's less of that in the cybersecurity industry. And I think it's because there's more of acknowledgement that certainly in the technical side of the business, that people are free to do their own thing and dress how they want and be how they want, so long as they're able to do the technical stuff. And that's one of the reasons why I love going to cybersecurity conferences. You can turn up wearing whatever you want. You can identify yourself however you want. And it's a very socially accepting environment because you're all into the same thing. How you show up and that sort of thing, it does not matter.
Doesn't matter.
No, it doesn't. And in other industries, in particular more conservative parts of the public sector, it's the kind of case it sounds horrible, but if your face or the way you dress doesn't fit, then that can be challenging. But and I've certainly, as a saying, when I saw this recruitment story, is the person said, I chose to recruit for attitude and I could teach the skills, because the ADHD person was like, I can do this. I want this job. I want to succeed. And they said it was the best person, the best threat hunter, best technical person on their team by far, because they'd taken a chance. The person was so grateful. And because they had that, hyper-focused superpower, they would just power on and get buckets load. Like they'd outperform their entire team. And he said it was really gutting because I had to let him go because he could go on to much bigger things 5 years later. And I didn't want to because he was so fantastic. I taught him all the skills, but his perseverance, his tenacity, his resilience was just brilliant. It was amazing. And I guess that's what I'm seeing a lot more of, is that people and recruiters are starting to look at more the whole person. And I know it's funny. I've heard this recent narrative. People talk about soft skills traditionally, and a lot of people go, I don't like that term anymore, and they talk about it as core skills. But I think I'm definitely seeing a more of an emphasis on what is the total package of the person that you are actually hiring, and also, recognizing that you don't necessarily have to have CISP or CISM or all the other ISAC or ICS2 qualifications behind your name, although they can help with some of the fundamentals. It's actually about your commitment and knowledge. And one thing that's great and is characteristic about the cybersecurity community is a lot of people teach themselves. And it's all acquired knowledge. They tinker around and they code at night and all that sort of stuff. That's what they do. That's how a lot of people learn. Most of the most effective pen testers I've ever met have all been guys or girls that have taught themselves. Yes, some of them have done university degrees, but absolutely. Yep. But it started out as a passion, and they still, when they go home, that's the thing is, they struggle to switch off because they just love doing it so much. But what has been really, really good is that the organizations they work for, they hire the whole person. So you end up getting someone that's extraordinarily loyal and super productive and highly technically proficient. Like in many cases, much, much more so than their neurotypical counterparts. And I think a lot of that is because we're starting to see recruiters, other members of the industry, better understand what are the positive things that neurodivergence can bring into a cybersecurity workplace. And certainly, people with neurodivergence, I'll freely admit there are some industries that wouldn't be a good fit for them. It's, example, like having a person with huge amount of neurodiversion could potentially be challenged with someone, say, working in foreign affairs, or someone that had a really, really high degree of emphasis and focus on interpersonal interaction. And that was a key part of their job. That could be challenging for them. It's not to say they couldn't do it by any stretch of the imagination, but it could be more challenging for them. But certainly, I'm lucky enough to be in an industry that embraces this sort of, as I say, how we're wired, and actually recognizes the positive attributes and the positive contributions it can make. But unfortunately, as a wider society, we're still not as well educated or familiar as we need to be about helping guide the way and kind of creating emotionally safe spaces for people, because it's still not widely understood as a mainstream mental health issue, which is a horrible way of putting it, but that's kind of technically what it is. And there certainly isn't as much support or guidance available for people who want to who are newly diagnosed, or helping them for those who are thinking about exploring whether they need to be diagnosed and that sort of thing, because it can be pretty lonely. But once you actually better understand it, finding out people who can help better understand that is, it's really key. It's really key.
Nick, quick question. If someone's managing a person who's neurodivergent, what would your tips be for the manager on how to get the best out of that person? Because a lot of people still actually don't understand how it works, don't understand how to get the best of people, especially it could be in a high-paced working environment where, you have to meet a lot of deadlines, you have clients. What would you do if you were that person's manager?
Yeah, really good question, Rik. As I said, as I've sort of said before, sometimes is that, first of all, with an HR point of view, I wouldn't necessarily put someone who was a new manager with someone who was from a neurodiverse background, because it wouldn't be fair on the manager and it wouldn't necessarily be as fair on the neurodiverse person. That being said, though, one of the things I would be trying to do is as that new manager, you want to create a trust-based relationship with that person. I think humility goes a really long way. Being able to demonstrate a bit of vulnerability, a bit of, hey, I'm learning this as we go. We're all doing this sort of thing together. How can I help you get the best out of what you're doing? A bit of that servant leadership attitude, I think, goes a long way. But creating a space where that person can feel honest and be open about what's working for them, what's not. As I said previously, it allows us to really consider, one of the things I'll be considering is which clients I actually would have that individual with. Getting a client that is, flexible, able to be tolerant of chops and changes, doesn't necessarily mind having one or more consultants on a job, isn't necessarily absolutely wedded to this particular person doing the work, and that being consultant in that regard is really key, because I think that gives the ability to really concentrate and think about what they're actually doing and how they deliver it. I'd certainly be also pairing them with a senior consultant who ideally had a bent, or if you will, a inclination towards mentoring and being able to lead people. So it gives them that support to be able to understand, how do I do this? What's the most appropriate place to it? But also someone who that manager trusts, to be able to, someone to go, okay, we've got some problems here, or we need to look at this. So that consultant, the senior consultant, could be the eyes and ears for the manager as to what's going on. But also having that manager regularly check in with a neurodiverse person so they feel like they've got support. That makes them feel as though the manager's available and is keen to help and support them. But also, if they think there's a situation where there is going to be a high pressure task and really short deadlines, asking them, look, is there something you comfortable you can do? And if you can't, that's okay. But we just need to know now so we can make some arrangements for that. So creating a space where they don't have to feel penalised or potentially shamed in any way for what they might find difficult or what they may not be that great at. Because we all have things we're not good at. But those who are neurodivergent sometimes feel more sensitive about that or potentially feel a bit more ashamed about that sort of thing. And they really shouldn't. They really shouldn't, because that's just who they are and how they're wired. But it's creating a space where they can be comfortable with owning that, and also creating a space where they feel supported and that they're them, who they are, is not seen as a negative, but actual fact it's something that is really, really good. But also giving that person, I guess, an opportunity to try and match them up with jobs that really work for them as well. Creating that open dialogue. And I'm realising that some days will work and some days won't. But a lot of it's about creating a space where the neurodivergent person can feel comfortable speaking to their manager around who they are and what's going to work.
And the fact that, you just mentioned that some days it will work, some days it won't. That's the thing with everyone, right?
Yeah.
Some days are just terrible.
Yep.
Like you just feel like, why? Why is this happening to me?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Some days, as I was saying,
so great.
Some days I just don't want a Yeti. I just, I'm just like, I'm done. I'm out of it. And in some cases, it's interesting. Whenever I work, 90% of my time is just me and someone on a webcam like this, which is great. But when I actually get in a room with people, when I come to Wellington and I meet all my mates, it's, you've got 20 or 30 people all at once. And that's lovely. But it absolutely exhausts me because all of a sudden I've got this huge amount of stimulation, interaction, and I love the social interaction that comes with it, which you'd think that's really weird for someone like that. But actual fact, I find I get a lot of energy from it. But it does exhaust me, and I find it very difficult to actually get any really structured, meaningful work done because I'm so overstimulated with everything that's going on around me. So initially I thought, how am I going to manage working at home? But it's really cool. I can set my day out the way I want. I can work out what tasks I need to get done because I know what I need to get done. Pick and choose when I have lunch or how I want to do stuff and, make the environment the way I want it and that sort of thing. And it means I can just focus on doing my best self. The challenge, of course, is I've had to learn to do that. And so I'm always keen to say, look, if there are others in this situation, let's find out what works for you. And that's one of the reasons why I hope businesses continue in some extent to offer working from home options for their teams, because those who are neurodivergent, in many cases, working from home may be a less challenging option for them, depending on the nature of their job. If you are doing some really detailed, heavy-duty analytical stuff, having someone potentially interrupt you or disturb you can be really challenging because it may take a while to re-engage again. But if you've actually got, but if you're in that situation where you're undisturbed, you could smash that in like half the time that most normal people would have done. And that's huge. That's a win for everyone. It really is.
Awesome. Hey, Nick, I think this has been a fantastic conversation. I have learned quite a lot, and I'm sure our listeners and our viewers would have enjoyed this episode because it is, I would consider this topic that you chose a very beautiful, something that I don't think a lot of people actually understand, especially in cybersecurity, because a lot of people actually tend to overlook the fact that, someone could be neurodivergent.
Cybersecurity is a team sport. No one sits on the bench.
Yeah.
Everyone plays the full game.
Yeah.
And, just because you tick a little bit differently doesn't mean you have to say to bring the oranges. You can bring the oranges if you want to.
Absolutely.
But if you want to be in the starting five, you should have the chance to do that.
And again, Nick, as I said, I would love to have you back.
Yeah, absolutely.
As a returning guest.
Absolutely, anytime.
Every time I listen to you talk, it's just delightful and insightful at the same time because I guess it's probably your way of engaging with people, which is really nice. Which is why a lot of clients actually have really good things to say about your work.
Oh, they're all telling lies. Telling lies.
Before we wrap the session off, 2024 has been really crazy, right? Like with the job cuts, with the government change, with the year just going by really quick. I'm hoping for a better 2025. What are your predictions in the market? What do you think?
I have to say, I'm really glad I'm living in New Zealand right now because the fact that President Trump has been re-elected is concerning. because it's interesting. I once heard a quote. I can't remember what it's from. Is
I'm pretty sure Trump supporters will dislike this video, but it's okay.
well, hey, we live in an economy and we live in a democracy
yeah,
where people can express their own free views,
and we've got freedoms.
Absolutely.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yep, absolutely. And I guess the key thing is that the quote was that the US election is the only election for which the world should have the ability to vote in, because the US has such a disproportionate amount of influence and power in international politics and that sort of thing. And I just, when I think of the 6th January storming of the US Capitol building, and the massive social and political impact it had on the United States, but also just in terms of how democracies function. He is such a polarizing person, and he seems to bring out the really dark side in some aspects of American society. I love the United States. I think it's a fantastic country, and it brings so much richness to the world around it, and it has a huge amount to offer. But there is also, for some reason, there's some elements that he seems to incite, xenophobia and other really ugly traits in people that seem to be, and it's not anger, it's fear, fear of those around them, fear of what might be. When I look at some of the narrative going around immigration, I mean, the United States as a country in of itself, as a republic, is defined by immigration. That's how the settlers came to the New World. So the hypocrisy that goes on, I find really difficult to fathom. But then, of course, across the other side of the Bering Strait, we've got Mr. Putin and his ongoing activities in Ukraine. And what really bothers me is it doesn't seem to be letting up anytime soon. And I saw, when I was on a trip recently, I think it was a film about some journalists who were stuck in Mariupol during the siege there. And it was just absolutely heartbreaking, some of the stuff that these people have to go through. And they're just trying to live their lives. So I guess what I'm saying is, I really like living here. It's a pretty lovely little place to be. But also, I don't think we should be blind to the fact that we've got our own challenges. Certainly the treaty Principles Bill has become a really polarising issue in New Zealand. And for a country which sort of prides itself on its progress around race relations, I think it's become a real step back. And I guess this is one of the challenges about living in a democracy, is while a democracy is 99% of the time are great places, the very notion of democracy is freedom of speech and freedom of expression. And we have to, while we may not like what people have to say, we still have to give them the space to be able to say it and respect the contributions they're making. And we don't sort of prosecute and denigrate people just because we disagree with them. However, it does concern me of the societal fabric that's kind of being eaten away here by some of the stuff that's going on. And, when I remember some of the protest action that was happening towards the COVID lockdown in Wellington, where I was still living at the time, that was really unsettling. You don't think of that sort of thing happening in New Zealand. And, it's in some ways the Hikoi March, because, I wasn't quite old enough to remember the 1977 Land March with Dame Whenekupa, but I understand there's some quite strong historical echoes of that with the Hikoi that happened recently. So I think next year we're going to continue to see some real political turbulence what's going on in New Zealand and offshore. I think our economy is going to still take some time to get back up on its feet. It's really heartbreaking at the moment to see a lot of friends and colleagues really finding it difficult in the IT community. There's just cutbacks and real fiscal tightening going on all around. It's just one of those things. We will eventually weather it and get through it, but it still doesn't stop some of the stress and the heartache and the difficulties that colleagues and people are going through. And I really, really feel for them. I really do. Certainly I see, with folks and businesses here in Dunedin, it's certainly all around the place. So that's one of the things, when I talk to my clients, it's not so much, it's a case of, what can we do to help you? How can we make things easier? How can we kind of alleviate that burden and help you guys deliver the best you can with what you have? So kind of being a real, as well as being a professional, being a friend, helping, just saying, hey, we're human too. We want to help you guys, get through this. Providing sometimes the best thing you can do is just provide a sympathetic ear and go, yep, I get it, I understand. And certainly a lot of the time in my virtual CISO role, you get to know people very, very well as people, not just as professionals. So being able to say, hey, how you going, mate? You got time for a coffee or for a beer? And that can mean the world to people. Someone's been able to engage with someone who's not in their day-to-day job, but still knows enough about what's going on to be sympathetic and provide a bit of a sounding board can sometimes be just some of the best things you can do. And sometimes a coffee or a beer will be virtual, a bit like this. But it's a case of just being, hey, if you need anything, I'm here. And that can be sometimes the best things you can do. So that's what I'm going to continue to be doing, is just kind of making myself available, being supportive, and just, as Jacinda said, just try to be kind and support people as we go. And we'll get through eventually there, but I certainly don't think we're through the worst of it yet. So things will hopefully improve, but I think we may have a few more bumps to go yet.
Yeah, the world does need a lot of kindness right now with everything that's going on, but you're right, we are sort of hidden away in this bubble, shielded from a lot of things. We are lucky.
We're real lucky.
Yeah. That's sweet, mate. Hey, again, really enjoyed having this conversation with you today.
Thank you for having me, mate. I appreciate it.
Totally. Like, I was really wanting to do this for the longest time, but life and professional life took over. So I'm really glad we made it.
Yeah, absolutely.
This time, and
and let me know. We'll come back again anytime you want, mate. More than happy to do so.
Absolutely, and lovely weather outside here, and lovely outside Dunedin too.
Yeah, we're lucky. It's not quite there yet, but the height of summer doesn't get dark yet, or 10:30, 11 o'clock. So we've got long days, but it's not too bad.
Long days. Yep, exactly.
Yep.
But no, otherwise, have a lovely rest of your day.
I will do, mate.
And thank you again. We'll catch you later.
Great. Thanks very much, mate. And thanks to all your listeners and viewers as well. Cheers. I appreciate them taking the time.
All right.
See
Cheers,
you,
guys.
See you.
ya.
Bye.